Farje is a journalist and Latin American analyst. He joins me now live from London. Hi, Javier. So how much more pressure can Nicolas Maduro take here? And might it make sense to hold a presidential election at some point, not least for Maduro, to prove that he has the support he says he has?
Well, for as long as the armed forces are on the side of Maduro, he can relax a bit, although the situation is very tense. You're absolutely right. Some countries in the European Union have recognized Mr. Guaido, but other countries haven't, like Italy, Portugal, the Netherlands. This is not a European Union recognition, but some countries within the European Union. And we must understand as well that the European Union does not have a great deal of influence in Venezuela. The United States have more influence than the European Union. So for as long as Mr. Maduro has the support of the armed forces, and so far that support remains intact, he can he can be bullish about it, and he can tell what he said, to say to the United States, look, don't try to invade because there would be trouble here. We mustn't forget, I visited barracks, military barracks in Lara State, west of Caracas in 2017, and the armed forces have been preparing for a possible invasion of the Americans for the last 3-4 years. So the armed forces are not actually unprepared for this possibility. And of course, when we are talking about humanitarian aid, there was discussions about creating a corridor, but the United States can hardly deliver any kind of humanitarian aid without the logistic support of the army, and the army is very unlikely to do that because, as you said, Maduro believes that this could be an attempt to penetrate the country and invade it by the back door.
Right. I mean, you say he has the support of the army, but many argue that that support is actually fading, particularly behind the scenes. But let me ask you very honestly, if a presidential election were held now, an honest, clear, fair presidential election, do you think Maduro could win?
Not necessarily, no. Let me tell you why. During the last presidential election, which has not been recognized by many countries, an informal opposition candidate stood, despite the fact that the opposition's official position was to boycott it. He polled 30% of the vote without the support of the opposition. Had the opposition been united around a candidate with a credible economic and political program to get Venezuela out of the current crisis, the possibilities that that candidate would have had to win were very big. So not necessarily Maduro would win this election, because people, as you rightly said in your report, and everybody say, are fed up with the situation in Venezuela, hunger and lack of medical care. So no, he wouldn't necessarily win, but he has a constituency. We mustn't forget that during the demonstrations during the weekend, a huge number of people came out to support Maduro. He has a great deal of support among the working classes people, whether this opposition has mainly support among the middle class and upper middle classes in Venezuela, which shows a clear class division in Venezuela. But no, I don't think Maduro could claim that he would win an election today if he stood against a credible, unified candidate of the opposition.
But I mean, those core supporters, how far would they actually go to protect him? He's insinuated, you know, the foreign intervention backing Juan Guaido could actually foment civil war in the country. Do you think his supporters would go that far to take up arms and actually fight in this war, especially knowing that there are U.S. threats lingering as well to send in their own military forces, or at least military support?
But I think they have, during the Chavez government and now with Maduro, they have formed some militias which would have been prepared for a possible invasion. This wouldn't be enough for Mr. Maduro to survive. He would need the fighting force of the armed forces. The armed forces, as I said to you, I had a conversation with a contact of mine today, just before we went on air, who has had a conversation with military officers. And so far, that support remains intact. For as long as that support remains, then the combination of the population and the armed forces could stop an invasion or could cause a great deal of trouble. But it would create a bloodbath, because it would create a civil war, it would create more violence, but also, and this is extremely important as well, apart from the tragedy of having sort of blood in the streets of Venezuela, it would alienate many of the countries that actually support Mr. Guaido, because they have already made it very clear, many Latin American countries have made it very clear that although they support Mr. Guaido, they would reject any attempt by the Americans to invade or to intervene militarily in Venezuela. That would alienate many of the potential supporters that Mr. Guaido has, and that could be very counterproductive for his regime.
Okay.
So it would be, there are people enough prepared to fight for Mr. Maduro, but again, we will only know if that happens, and or hopefully it won't come to that.
Indeed. Okay. Well, Javier Farje, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us live from London.